You stand at the edge of time itself, where the Nile's life-giving waters carved civilization from barren stone. Here, in the 14th century before Christ, when the world was young and gods walked among mortals, a revolution began that would shatter the very foundations of heaven and earth. This is not merely a tale of ancient Egypt. This is the story of how divine power, when twisted by grief and obsession, can transform love into horror and family into nightmare. Picture yourself in 1353 BCE, breathing the incense-heavy air of Thebes, where the god Amun-Ra has reigned supreme for over a millennium. The massive temple complexes stretch toward the heavens like stone prayers, their corridors echoing with the chants of thousands of priests who control not just spiritual life, but the very pulse of the empire's economy. Gold flows like water through these sacred halls, tribute from Nubia and the Levant filling coffers that rival the pharaoh's own treasury. But change is coming, change that will make the desert sands run red with revolution. Enter Amenhotep IV, soon to be known by a name that would become synonymous with heresy, Akhenaten. You can almost see him now, this unlikely revolutionary, his elongated skull catching the morning light as he gazes eastward from his palace balcony. His body defies the classical Egyptian ideal, thin where pharaohs should be broad, soft where they should be muscular, marked by physical anomalies that whisper of genetic fragility or divine difference. Some say his appearance reflects the god's displeasure. Others wonder if he carries the physical manifestations of secrets too dark to speak aloud. The political landscape trembles beneath his feet like quicksand. Egypt's empire stretches from the cataracts of Nubia to the cedar forests of Lebanon, a vast network of tribute, trade, and tenuous alliances held together by the divine authorate, tie of the pharaoh. But authority is a delicate thing, easily shattered by doubt. In the great halls of Thebes, the priests of Amun grow fat on temple offerings, while common people struggle through seasons of failed harvests. The Hittites press against Egypt's northern borders, their iron weapons singing a new song of warfare that bronze cannot answer. Diplomatic correspondence from vassal kingdoms grows increasingly desperate, pleading for military aid that may never come. Into this world of mounting crisis, Akhenaten introduces his revolution. Not gradually, not diplomatically, but with the sudden violence of a desert storm. He declares that all gods but one are false, Aten, the solar disk, whose rays end in human hands that offer the breath of life. Imagine the shockwaves rippling through every temple, every noble house, every village shrine. A civilization built on the worship of hundreds of deities suddenly finds its entire spiritual foundation declared a lie by the very man who embodies divine authority on earth. But revolutions demand new capitals, new beginnings scraped from virgin sand. You can almost feel the heat shimmering off the limestone cliffs as Akhenaten selects his site, a crescent of desert between the Nile and the eastern mountains, untouched by previous worship, pure enough for his singular god. Here he will build Akhetaten, horizon of Aten, a city that exists solely to worship his chosen deity. Construction begins with the fever-dream intensity of obsession, thousands of workers laboring under the merciless sun to carve a new reality from stone and mud brick. The move from Thebes to this virgin city represents more than geographical relocation. It signals the birth of the world's first recorded monotheism, predating Moses by generations. Yet this revolution carries shadows that grow longer with each passing day. In abandoning the traditional capital, Akhenaten isolates himself from the power networks that have sustained pharaonic authority for millennia. The priests of Amun, their wealth threatened, begin to whisper of madness and divine punishment. Provincial governors, cut off from regular communication, start making independent decisions that fray the empire's edges. Within the royal family, tensions simmer like water about to boil. Queen Nefertiti, Akhenaten's primary wife and political partner, initially supports his religious revolution. Her beauty, immortalized in the famous limestone bust that would survive the millennia, masks a keen political intelligence that recognizes both the opportunities and dangers of their radical path. Together, they produce 6 daughters in rapid succession: Meritaten, Meketaten, Ankhesenpaten, Neferneferuaten Tasharit, Neferneferure, and Setapenre, no sons. In a culture where male heirs ensure dynastic stability, this absence of princes becomes a source of mounting anxiety. The royal daughters grow up in this strange new world, their childhood shaped by their father's obsessions and their mother's ambitions. They are simultaneously the most powerful women in the known world and the most constrained, their every breath monitored by protocol, their futures determined by political necessity rather than personal desire. The eldest, Meritaten, shoulders the weight of being heir apparent in a culture unaccustomed to female succession. Her sisters watch and learn, understanding instinctively that they exist not as individuals, but as political instruments in their father's grand design. As Akhenaten's reign progresses, whispers begin to circulate through the corridors of power, whispers that make even hardened courtiers lower their voices to barely audible murmurs. The pharaoh's relationship with his daughters appears to transcend the normal bounds of paternal affection. Royal marriage between siblings has precedent in Egyptian history, justified by the need to preserve divine bloodlines, but marriages between fathers and daughters remain deeply taboo, violations of cosmic order that risk bringing down the wrath of all gods, even Aten himself. The stage is set for tragedy on an epic scale. Here, in this experimental city, built on revolutionary ideals, a family will discover that the line between divine inspiration and mortal madness is thinner than papyrus. The very isolation that Akhenaten sought to purify his vision will become the prison in which his dynasty destroys itself from within. What happens when absolute power meets absolute grief? When divine authority collides with human frailty? When the desperate need to preserve a bloodline overwhelms every natural boundary? The desert winds carry no answers, only the promise that some truths are too terrible for time to bury completely. You witness the birth of a revolution in the trembling hands of a sickly prince. In the opulent chambers of Malkata Palace, as the Nile floods paint the world emerald and gold, a child enters existence already marked by destiny's cruel finger. This is Amenhotep IV, born into the suffocating embrace of divine expectation, his first breath drawn in rooms where the weight of 3,000 years of tradition presses down like the lid of a sarcophagus. Picture his father, Amenhotep III, the magnificent Sun King whose reign represents the absolute zenith of Egyptian power and luxury. For 38 years, this pharaoh has ruled an empire so wealthy that gold is literally given away to foreign princes like common pottery. His palace walls gleam with electrum, his gardens overflow with exotic plants from the ends of the earth, and his harem houses daughters of every vassal king from Babylon to the heart of Africa. Into this world of unimaginable abundance, a son is born who will reject everything his father has built. The child's appearance troubles the court physicians from his earliest days. Where royal infants should be robust and perfectly formed, little Amenhotep IV exhibits disturbing anomalies. His skull grows elongated, stretching toward an almost alien configuration that makes the traditional crowns of Egypt sit awkwardly upon his brow. His limbs develop with feminine curves rather than masculine strength, his hips widening in ways that whisper of hormonal mysteries the ancient world cannot comprehend. Some courtiers, in hushed conversations behind painted screens, wonder if the gods have marked this prince for some special purpose or special curse. You can almost hear the wet nurses whispering as they tend to the strange prince, their voices carrying the kind of fear that settles in the bones. His eyes, they murmur. They see things that aren't there, and sometimes they don't see things that are. The child experiences frequent illness, mysterious fevers that come and go like desert storms, leaving him weak and prone to fits of trembling that the royal physicians attribute to divine visitation. In a culture that views physical perfection as a reflection of spiritual purity, these anomalies become source of deep anxiety for the royal family. Education for a prince of Egypt involves more than learning hieroglyphs and statecraft. Young Amenhotep IV spends his days in the company of the highest priests of Amun-Ra, men whose knowledge encompasses astronomy, mathematics, medicine, and the intricate rituals that maintain cosmic order. But something in the boy's nature rebels against their teachings. While other princes memorized the traditional hymns praising Amun's supremacy, Amenhotep IV gazes obsessively at the sun, claiming to hear voices in its blazing silence that contradict everything the priests teach. The priests notice this disturbing tendency early. High priest Amenhotep, son of Hapu, a man whose wisdom is legendary throughout the ancient world, takes special interest in the troubled prince. You can imagine their private lessons in the cool shadows of Karnak Temple, the old priest's voice growing increasingly strained as he attempts to guide his pupil toward orthodox thinking. But the boy's questions grow more heretical with each passing year. "Why," he asks, his young voice cutting through incense-heavy air, "do we need so many gods when the sun alone gives us life?" The priest's silence stretches like a held breath, heavy with implications neither dares voice. Into this tense atmosphere steps a figure who will reshape not just the prince's destiny, but the course of history itself. Nefertiti enters Amenhotep IV's life like sunrise after endless night, beautiful beyond mortal description, intelligent beyond her years, and possessed of a political instinct that recognizes opportunity where others see only chaos. Some sources suggest she arrives as part of a diplomatic marriage arrangement, perhaps from the Mitanni kingdom, bringing with her foreign ideas about religion and governance that will prove catastrophically influential. Their courtship unfolds against the backdrop of Amenhotep III's declining health, when the old king's legendary vitality begins to fade like paint on ancient walls. You can almost see them walking together through the palace gardens, her exquisite profile complementing his strange features in ways that make observers wonder if the gods are crafting some cosmic joke or cosmic purpose. She listens to his religious visions without the horror that marks other courtiers' faces, instead offering encouragement that transforms his uncertainty into conviction. The marriage ceremony itself reflects the couple's emerging heterodoxy. While traditional royal weddings invoke dozens of deities and require elaborate rituals spanning weeks, Amenhotep IV and Nefertiti conduct their union with stark simplicity, dedicating themselves primarily to Aten, the solar disk whose importance grows daily in the prince's cosmology. Palace observers note how the bride's eyes never leave her husband's face, as if she recognizes something in his madness that might be divinity, or might be useful. Children arrive with startling rapidity. Meritaten, born within the first year of marriage, emerges as a perfect fusion of her parents' features, her mother's stunning beauty tempered by her father's unusual bone structure, creating an ethereal loveliness that seems almost supernatural. 2 years later, Meketaten arrives, followed by Ankhesenaten, then 3 more daughters in quick succession. No sons. In a dynasty where male heirs ensure stability, this succession of daughters becomes increasingly problematic, though Amenhotep IV claims to see divine purpose in their feminine preponderance. The royal nursery becomes a kingdom unto itself, filled with the laughter and tears of 6 small girls whose futures remain uncertain in a world where female succession challenges every precedent. You can imagine Nefertiti moving among their beds at night, perhaps whispering stories of their father's visions, preparing them psychologically for the revolution that approaches like a desert sandstorm. These children grow up understanding instinctively that they exist not merely as beloved daughters, but as potential instruments of their father's grand design. As Amenhotep III's health deteriorates, the prince's religious obsessions intensify. He spends hours in private meditation, claiming direct communication with Aten that bypasses all priestly intermediaries. Palace servants report finding him in his chambers at dawn, arms raised toward the rising sun, tears streaming down his elongated face as he receives what he claims are divine instructions for humanity's salvation. The gap between his private visions and public expectations widens into a chasm that will soon swallow everything familiar about Egyptian civilization. The psychological isolation builds like pressure inside a sealed tomb, surrounded by family who humor his eccentricities and courtiers who fear to challenge his increasingly heretical pronouncements. The future Akhenaten begins to lose touch with any reality beyond his own fevered imagination. His wife's support, meant to strengthen his resolve, instead enables his descent into obsessions that will ultimately destroy everything they touch. In the royal children's laughter, seeds of tragedy already take root, nourished by a father's visions and a mother's ambitions. Who could have foreseen that this sickly prince would reshape the ancient world, or that his daughters would pay the ultimate price for his divine madness? You stand witness to the moment when divine dreams begin their descent into nightmare. The year is 1340 BCE, and Akhenaten, the horizon of Aten, has risen from virgin sand into a gleaming testament to one man's vision of cosmic truth. Its limestone temples catch the morning light like prayers made manifest, while painted walls celebrate the royal family, basking in Aten's life-giving rays. But even in paradise, death finds a way to enter, and with it comes the first terrible whisper of what lengths a grieving father might traverse to preserve what remains. The plague arrives without warning, as such horrors always do. One morning, servants in the workers' quarters fail to rise for their duties. By evening, entire families lie still in their modest homes, their bodies bearing the telltale marks of some cosmic punishment that even Aten's pure light cannot cleanse. You can almost smell the acrid smoke of funeral pyres mixing with temple incense, creating an unholy perfume that makes the very air taste of mortality and divine displeasure. Within days, the contagion spreads with the inexorable certainty of floodwater. The carefully planned city becomes a maze of suffering, where the sounds of construction give way to the wails of mourning mothers and the chanted prayers of priests desperately seeking intervention from their singular god. Akhenaten watches from his palace windows as his perfect creation transforms into a charnel house, his elongated face growing gaunt with sleepless nights spent pleading with Aten for answers that never come. But disease is merely the herald of greater horrors. The Nile, source of all life in Egypt, begins to behave with terrifying unpredictability. Where for 3 millennia it has risen and fallen in cosmic rhythm, now it brings either devastating floods that wash away entire villages or catastrophic droughts that leave fields cracked and barren. Granaries that once overflowed with abundance stand empty, their silence echoing with the ghostly whispers of a starving population. You can picture the desperation creeping through every level of society like poison in wine. Farmers abandon their fields to wander in search of sustenance, their children growing hollow-eyed and skeletal as the months stretch on without proper harvests. In the great cities of Memphis and Thebes, bread riots break out with increasing frequency, forcing governors to deploy troops against their own people. The empire that once fed half the known world now cannot nourish its own children. Foreign kingdoms, sensing weakness, begin to test Egypt's resolve. Diplomatic correspondence arriving at Akhenaten carries increasingly desperate pleas from vassal states under attack. Babylonians pressing against the northern territories, Nubians raiding the southern borders, and most terrifyingly, the Hittites advancing with their superior iron weapons that slice through Egyptian bronze like papyrus. Yet Akhenaten, consumed with his religious revolution, pays these external threats little attention, believing that Aten's protection will prove sufficient against all earthly powers. Into this atmosphere of mounting crisis comes the blow that will shatter what remains of the pharaoh's sanity. Princess Akhenaten, second daughter of the royal line, falls ill with a mysterious ailment that baffles the court physicians. You can almost see her lying in her chambers, once vibrant and laughing, now pale as limestone with fever that burns like desert sun beneath her translucent skin. Her parents maintain constant vigil, Nefertiti applying cool cloths to her daughter's burning forehead while Akhenaten paces the floor like a caged leopard, muttering prayers that grow increasingly frantic as the child's condition deteriorates. The death of Akhenaten marks a watershed moment in the royal family's psychological landscape. Archaeological evidence suggests she died during childbirth, a princess barely into adolescence, carrying a child whose parentage remains shrouded in whispers too terrible for official records. The tomb paintings at Amarna show the royal family mourning her passing with unprecedented emotional display, their usual formal poses abandoned for gestures of genuine grief that hint at secrets too dark for hieroglyphic revelation. In the weeks following Akhenaten's funeral, palace servants begin to notice disturbing changes in their pharaoh's behavior. The man who once spent hours in public ceremonies, basking in Aten's light while his people offered worship, now retreats into private chambers for days at a time. When he emerges, his eyes carry a haunted quality that makes even seasoned courtiers avert their gaze, as if looking directly into his face might reveal truths too horrifying for mortal comprehension. The whispers begin in the servants' quarters, spreading through the palace like smoke through cracks in stone. They speak of strange ceremonies conducted in sealed chambers, of the pharaoh's remaining daughters summoned to private audiences that last from sunset until dawn. The eldest, Akhenaten, begins to appear at court functions wearing jewelry and regalia previously reserved for Nefertiti, her young face bearing the weight of responsibilities no child should carry. You can sense the moment when grief transforms into something far more dangerous, when a father's natural love becomes twisted by desperation into possession that recognizes no natural boundaries. The loss of Akhenaten has torn away whatever psychological barriers once constrained Akhenaten's relationship with his surviving children. In his fevered logic, death has proven that conventional morality offers no protection against cosmic chaos. Only by binding his bloodline to himself with the strongest possible ties can he hope to preserve what remains of his divine dynasty. Akhenaten, third daughter and now second in line of succession, begins to exhibit signs of the profound psychological trauma that accompanies children forced into roles beyond their comprehension. Palace observers note how she flinches when her father approaches, how her laughter has taken on a brittle quality that suggests barely contained hysteria. Yet she cannot escape, cannot protest, cannot even fully understand what is happening to her world, as the boundaries between family affection and political necessity dissolve into something infinitely more sinister. The priests of Amun, exiled from their traditional power centers, but still maintaining networks of influence throughout Egypt, seize upon these whispers as evidence of their long-held claims about Akhenaten's fundamental corruption. Their secret messages, smuggled out of Akhenaten by sympathetic servants, paint pictures of a pharaoh so consumed by grief and megalomania that he has violated the most sacred taboos of Egyptian civilization. The gods themselves, they claim, have turned their faces away from Egypt in horror at what their supposed representative has become. Nefertiti, once her husband's strongest supporter and closest advisor, finds herself caught between loyalty to the man she married and revulsion at what he is becoming. You can imagine her lying awake in chambers that no longer feel safe, listening to her husband's feverish mutterings in the darkness while trying to devise some strategy that might save her remaining children from becoming instruments of his increasingly twisted vision of divine will.